In a small, quiet diner on the edge of a sleepy town, life moved at its own unhurried pace. The kind of place where everyone knew each other's orders by heart, and the coffee pot was always warm. This little eatery sat nestled between an old gas station and a dusty road that led to nowhere in particular. It wasn't fancy. Just a handful of booths with cracked vinyl seats, walls adorned with faded posters of classic movie stars, and the faint smell of grease hanging in the air. But for the locals, it was home. Behind the counter stood a woman who had become as much a part of the diner as the creaky floorboards beneath her feet. Her name was Maya Johnson, though most people around here just called her the Waitress. She wore her uniform like armor, crisp white shirt tucked neatly into black pants, apron tied snugly around her waist, and comfortable sneakers ready for hours of running back and forth. To anyone walking in off the street, she looked like any other hard-working server trying to make ends meet. What they didn't know, and what she preferred to keep hidden, was that beneath her calm demeanor lay a secret that would surprise even those who thought they knew her best. Maya grew up surrounded by discipline and strength. Raised by her grandfather after her parents passed away when she was young, she learned early on about resilience. Her grandfather wasn't just any ordinary man. He was a martial arts instructor whose dojo once thrived in their neighborhood. From the age of 10, Maya spent countless evenings practicing kicks, punches, and blocks under his watchful eye. At first, it was just something fun, a way to bond with him, but over time, it became so much more. Karate taught her focus, patience, and how to channel anger into purpose. By the time she turned 18, she'd earned her black belt and started competing in regional tournaments. And though she never sought glory, she won more medals than she cared to count. But winning trophies wasn't why Maya kept training. For her, karate wasn't about showing off or proving herself. It was personal. It gave her a sense of control in a world that often felt chaotic. When life threw curveballs, like losing her job at a clothing store during the pandemic or struggling to pay bills, she found solace in the rhythm of her movements. Every punch, every block reminded her that she could handle whatever came her way. Despite her impressive skills, Maya rarely talked about her martial arts background. At work, colleagues joked that she must have superhuman stamina because she never seemed tired no matter how busy things got. Customers complimented her efficiency, but assumed her grace came from years of waitressing experience. Few suspected that the same hand serving plates of pancakes could deliver a knockout blow if needed. That suited Maya just fine. She didn't want attention or drama. All she wanted was to live peacefully, helping others while keeping her extraordinary abilities to herself. On one sunny afternoon, the diner buzzed with its usual energy. Truckers slurped down cups of strong coffee before hitting the road again. Families argued lightheartedly over which slice of pie to order. Tourists snapped photos of the vintage jukebox in the corner, marveling at how quaint everything felt. Everything seemed normal, that is, until he walked in. The door swung open with a bang and all eyes turned toward the newcomer. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his leather jacket covered in patches that screamed rebellion. Tattoos snaked up both arms, disappearing beneath the sleeves of his shirt. A scruffy beard framed his face, and dark sunglasses hid his eyes. This was no ordinary customer. Everyone recognized him instantly. Darren Duke Granger, leader of a notorious biker gang known for causing trouble wherever they went. His reputation preceded him. He was rude, loud, and infamous for picking fights over the smallest things. Most folks avoided crossing paths with him altogether. As Darren strode inside, the chatter in the room dimmed noticeably. People exchanged nervous glances, wondering what he was doing there. Some tried to act casual, burying their noses in menus or pretending to be engrossed in conversation. Others froze mid-bite, forks hovering uncertainly above their plates. Even the cook peeked out from the kitchen window, watching warily as Darren made his way to the counter. Maya saw him approach too, though she didn't let her expression change. Years of dealing with difficult customers had taught her to stay, calm no matter what. Still, there was something unsettling about the way he carried himself, like he owned the place and everyone in it. As he leaned against the counter, his presence loomed large, casting a shadow over the otherwise cheerful atmosphere. Little did anyone know this encounter was about to take a turn none of them would forget anytime soon. The moment Darren stepped up to the counter, the air in the diner seemed to shift. He didn't bother looking at the menu board or even acknowledging the other customers waiting patiently for their orders. Instead, he slammed his fist down hard on the countertop, making the salt and pepper shakers rattle. The sound echoed through the room, silencing what little chatter remained. "Hey, you," Darren barked, pointing a thick finger at Maya. "I'm starving. Get me some food now." Maya looked up from where she was refilling napkin dispensers. She'd been helping an older couple decide between blueberry and cherry pie when Darren interrupted. For a split second, she hesitated, not out of fear, but because she needed to finish assisting the couple first. It was how she worked. One task at a time, no matter who walked in. "I'll be with you in just a moment," she replied calmly, her voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. Turning back to the elderly pair, she smiled warmly. "Would you like me to box both slices for you? That way you can try them both?" The couple nodded gratefully, clearly eager to escape the growing unease in the room. As Maya turned to grab a takeout box, Darren's face twisted into a sneer. "You think you can ignore me?" he growled, leaning closer over the counter. His breath reeked of stale cigarettes and cheap whiskey. "You don't know who I am, do you?" Maya straightened slowly, meeting his gaze without flinching. She'd dealt with difficult people before. Angry truckers upset about bad service, teenagers mouthing off after being told they couldn't sit in the non-smoking section. But something about this man felt different. There was menace in his tone, a deliberate attempt to intimidate her. Still, she refused to let him see her rattled. "No, sir," she said evenly, setting the boxed pies aside. "I don't know who you are, but if you'd like, I can take your order now." Her politeness only seemed to infuriate him further. Darren's lips curled into a snarl as he leaned even farther across the counter, invading her space. "Don't give me that sir crap," he snapped. "I don't take orders from your kind." The words hit like a punch to the gut, though Maya kept her expression neutral. She'd heard comments like this before, subtle jabs disguised as jokes, muttered remarks about her hair or skin color, but never so blatantly cruel. The room went deathly silent, every eye glued to the unfolding scene. Some patrons shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others stared down at their plates, unwilling to make eye contact. No one dared speak up. For a long moment, Maya simply stood there, processing what had just happened. Part of her wanted to walk away, to retreat to the safety of the kitchen and let someone else handle this mess. But another part, the part shaped by years of martial arts training and lessons from her grandfather, told her to stay grounded. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about standing firm in the face of hatred. "That's enough," she finally said, her voice calm but firm. "If you want to eat here, you'll need to treat everyone with respect, including me." Darren blinked, caught off guard by her composure. Most people would have backed down by now, stammering apologies or avoiding further confrontation. But not her. Her confidence threw him off balance, and for a brief second uncertainty flickered across his face. Then, just as quickly, it vanished, replaced by rage. "Oh, really?" he spat, reaching across the counter and grabbing her wrist tightly. "You gonna tell me what to do? You think you're tough?" Pain shot through Maya's arm, but she didn't flinch. Years of sparring matches and grueling practice sessions had taught her how to endure discomfort. More importantly, they'd taught her how to assess situations quickly. In that instant, she sized Darren up. His stance was wide but unsteady, his grip strong but clumsy. He relied on brute force rather than precision, a weakness she could exploit if things escalated. Still, she gave him one last chance to back off. Looking him directly in the eyes, she said, "Let go of my arm. Now." But Darren wasn't listening. If anything, her defiance made him angrier. He tightened his grip, yanking her closer until their faces were inches apart. "You better watch yourself," he hissed. "People like you shouldn't act so high and mighty." Time seemed to slow as Maya weighed her options. On one hand, she could call the police and let them deal with the situation. On the other, she knew the chances of anyone stepping in to help were slim. These bikers operated outside the law, and Darren wasn't the type to back down easily. Besides, running to authorities felt like admitting defeat, and Maya didn't believe in giving bullies power over her. So instead of cowering, she did the unexpected. With a sharp twist of her wrist, she broke free from his grasp. Before he could react, she stepped back, creating distance between them. For the first time since the altercation began, Darren looked genuinely surprised. His mouth opened as if to say something, but Maya beat him to it. "That's enough," she repeated, her voice louder this time. "I've put up with your attitude, but I won't tolerate violence. Back off, or we can settle this another way." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some patrons exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of it. Others watched intently, fascinated by the sudden turn of events. Even the cook poked his head out again, gripping a spatula like a weapon. Darren smirked, clearly amused by her challenge. "Settle this?" he echoed, crossing his arms. "What are you gonna do, huh? Throw a plate at me?" Maya didn't respond, immediately. Instead, she adjusted her footing slightly, shifting her weight onto the balls of her feet. To anyone unfamiliar with martial arts, the movement might have looked casual, like she was simply stretching her legs. But those who understood recognized it immediately. She was preparing to defend herself. When she finally spoke, her tone carried an edge of steel. "You seem pretty confident," she said, tilting her head slightly. "But I guarantee you're underestimating me. So here's the deal. You either leave quietly or we find out exactly what happens when someone picks a fight with the wrong person." The room held its breath. Darren hesitated, his smirk faltering for the briefest moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, he clenched his fists. Whatever doubts he'd had about her disappeared, replaced by sheer arrogance. After all, what harm could a waitress possibly pose? "Fine," he said, spreading his arms wide in mock surrender. "Show me what you've got." And with that, the tension in the diner reached a boiling point. What happened next would leave everyone talking for weeks and change the way they saw Maya forever. The moment Darren threw his arms wide in mock surrender, the tension in the diner became almost unbearable. Everyone held their breath, unsure of what would happen next. Some patrons glanced nervously toward the door, calculating how quickly they could make an escape if things got out of hand. Others leaned forward slightly, morbid curiosity keeping them rooted to their seats. Even the cook, still gripping his spatula like a lifeline, froze mid-step as he watched the scene unfold. Maya didn't move immediately. Instead, she stood her ground, her body relaxed but alert. She'd trained for years to handle situations like this. Not necessarily brawls in diners, but moments when adrenaline surged and instincts took over. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind. "Stay calm, breathe, let them come to you." That advice had served her well in tournaments, and now it guided her here. Darren, on the other hand, seemed eager to prove himself. His smirk widened into a sneer as he stepped closer, cracking his knuckles loudly. "All right, sweetheart," he taunted, his voice dripping with condescension. "Let's see what you've got." He lunged forward without warning, swinging a meaty fist aimed squarely at Maya's face. It was the kind of reckless, brute force attack that relied purely on size and strength, and exactly what Maya had been waiting for. With lightning-fast reflexes, she ducked under his punch, letting it sail harmlessly past her head. The movement was so smooth, so effortless, that it caught everyone off guard, including Darren. "What the?" he muttered, stumbling slightly, as his momentum carried him forward. Before he could recover, Maya countered with a sharp kick to the back of his knee. The blow landed with precision, forcing his leg to buckle and sending him crashing onto one knee. Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one expected this turn of events. To most people in the room, Maya was just the friendly waitress who always remembered their coffee order, not someone capable of taking down a man twice her size. Yet there she was, standing tall, while Darren struggled to regain his balance. But Darren wasn't about to admit defeat. Fueled by embarrassment and rage, he pushed himself back up and charged again, throwing wild punches in every direction. Each swing was powerful but sloppy, easy for Maya to dodge. She sidestepped one punch, then another, moving with a grace that made her seem almost untouchable. Every time he missed, his frustration grew, his movements becoming more frantic and less controlled. "You're too slow," Maya said coolly, her voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. It wasn't mockery. It was a simple statement of fact, and yet it only served to enrage Darren further. With a roar, he launched himself at her once more, attempting to grab her shoulders and yank her off balance. But Maya was ready. As his hands closed in, she twisted sideways, slipping out of his reach. In the same motion, she delivered a quick palm strike to his chest, using his own momentum against him. The force sent him stumbling backward, colliding with a nearby table. Plates clattered to the floor, shattering into pieces as the impact knocked over chairs and sent drinks spilling everywhere. The noise snapped the room out of its stunned silence. A few people cheered instinctively, while others covered their mouths in shock. One elderly man sitting near the window muttered, "I don't believe this," under his breath, shaking his head in disbelief. For Darren, the humiliation was unbearable. He scrambled to his feet, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "You little," he snarled, charging yet again. This time, however, Maya decided to end it. As he barreled toward her, she waited until the last possible second before stepping aside and planting her foot firmly behind his. When he tripped over it, she followed up with a perfectly timed elbow strike to his side. The combination was devastating. Darren hit the floor hard, groaning in pain as he clutched his ribs. Breathing heavily, Maya straightened up and took a step back, surveying the damage. The entire diner stared at her in awe, some clapping hesitantly, others whispering excitedly among themselves. For a brief moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator in the corner. "Well?" Maya asked, looking down at Darren, who lay sprawled on the floor. Her tone was calm, almost conversational, as though she were asking about the weather. "Had enough?" Darren didn't respond. He glared up at her, his pride shattered along with the plates he'd knocked over. Slowly, painfully, he began pushing himself up, though it was clear he had no intention of continuing the fight. Instead, he staggered to his feet, clutching his side and muttering something unintelligible under his breath. Without another word, he stumbled toward the exit, shoving the door open and disappearing into the afternoon sunlight. The room erupted into applause. Customers who had been too afraid to intervene earlier now stood up, cheering and whistling in admiration. The cook emerged from the kitchen, grinning ear to ear as he gave Maya a thumbs up. Even the couple whose pie order had started all of this joined in, applauding enthusiastically. Maya, however, remained unfazed. She brushed a strand of hair out of her face and glanced around the room, her expression unreadable. Then, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened, she bent down to pick up the broken dishes scattered across the floor. "Y'all might want to settle your tabs," she said casually, tossing the shards into a trash bin. "We'll need to clean this mess up." Her words brought a round of laughter from the crowd, breaking the lingering tension. Someone shouted, "Ma'am, I think you should charge extra for the show," which earned more laughs and applause. Despite the attention, Maya stayed focused on her work. She wiped down the counter, checked on orders waiting in the kitchen, and even managed to crack a small smile when a young boy shyly approached her to say, "That was awesome." But beneath her composed exterior, Maya felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her. Relief, pride, and a touch of sadness, all rolled into one. She hadn't wanted any of this drama. All she'd ever wanted was to serve food, earn a paycheck, and live peacefully. Yet in standing up to Darren, she realized something important. Sometimes peace requires action. Sometimes staying quiet isn't an option. As the diner slowly returned to normalcy, Maya couldn't help but wonder how far the story of today's events would spread. Would people remember her as the waitress who took down a bully? Or would they forget about it by tomorrow, moving on to whatever new gossip came their way? One thing was certain. Life in the little roadside diner would never quite be the same again, and neither would Maya. The aftermath of the fight rippled through the diner like a storm slowly retreating. leaving behind a mix of awe, relief, and disbelief. Customers who had been frozen in their seats moments earlier now buzzed with excitement, recounting every detail of what they'd just witnessed. Some stood up to stretch their legs, while others leaned over tables to share theories about how Maya, a woman none of them truly knew, had managed to take down someone as imposing as Darren. "Did you see that kick?" one truck driver exclaimed, gesturing wildly with his hands. "She didn't even break a sweat. I thought she was going to get hurt for sure," another chimed in, shaking his head. But then, bam, he went down like a sack of potatoes. Even the cook, still holding his spatula, couldn't resist joining the conversation. "I've seen her work here for years," he said, pointing toward Maya, "and I never once guessed she could do something like that. She's always so quiet, so polite. Who would have thought?" Maya, meanwhile, stayed focused on cleaning up the mess. Broken glass crunched under her feet as she swept shards into a dustpan, her movements deliberate and calm. Despite the chaos around her, she seemed almost unfazed, as if taking down a biker in front of a room full of strangers was no big deal. But inside, her mind raced. She replayed the confrontation over and over again in her head. The way Darren had lunged at her, the sound of plates shattering when he crashed into the table, the stunned silence that followed his retreat. Part of her felt proud, knowing she'd stood her ground and defended herself. Another part, however, felt uneasy. She hadn't wanted any of this attention. All she'd ever asked for was to live quietly, serve food, and keep her skills hidden from the world. Now everyone in the diner, and likely beyond, knew exactly what she was capable of. As the initial shock wore off, people began approaching her, eager to express their admiration. A middle-aged woman wearing a floral dress stepped forward timidly, clutching her purse tightly. "Miss, I just want to say thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You showed us all that we don't have to put up with bullies like him." Maya looked up from sweeping and offered a small smile. "Thank you," she replied softly, "but I wasn't trying to make a point. I just wanted him to stop." Her humility only made the crowd admire her more. Someone else shouted, "Well, whatever your reason, you did good." This sparked another round of applause, which Maya acknowledged with a slight nod before returning to her task. Despite the praise, not everyone was thrilled about what had happened. The diner's owner, an older man named Mr. Thompson, emerged from his office looking flustered. His balding head glistened with sweat as he surveyed the damage: overturned chairs, spilled drinks, shattered plates, and a dent in the wall where Darren's body had slammed against it. "What in the world happened here?" he demanded, his voice rising above the chatter. When no one answered immediately, his eyes landed on Maya. "Was this because of that guy? The biker?" Before Maya could respond, one of the regulars piped up. "Sir, you should have seen it. That man came in here acting like he owned the place, throwing insults and grabbing her arm. Then he paused dramatically, pointing at Maya, took him down like nothing. It was incredible." Mr. Thompson blinked, clearly unsure whether to be impressed or furious. On one hand, Maya had single-handedly handled a dangerous situation without anyone getting seriously hurt. On the other hand, his diner now resembled the aftermath of a tornado. He sighed deeply, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Look," he said finally, addressing Maya, "I'm glad you're okay, and I appreciate that you stood up for yourself. But fights like this can't happen here. We could lose customers, or worse, get sued." Maya nodded, understanding his concerns. "I know, sir. And I'm sorry for the mess. I'll clean everything up myself, and I'll cover the cost of the damages." Mr. Thompson hesitated, glancing around the room. Several patrons were still clapping and cheering, clearly thrilled by the day's events. One man even suggested starting a fundraiser to help pay for repairs, which earned enthusiastic agreement from others. Seeing this, Mr. Thompson's expression softened slightly. "All right," he said reluctantly. "Just try to avoid any more confrontations, okay? I can't afford to replace half the furniture every week." With that, he turned and headed back to his office, muttering something about raising prices to cover the incident. The crowd laughed good-naturedly, but Maya noticed a few lingering looks of concern. Not everyone was convinced that the matter was resolved. Word of the altercation spread faster than anyone anticipated. By evening, social media feeds across town lit up with posts about the waitress who took down a biker. Videos captured by diners during the fight went viral within hours, drawing comments from viewers nationwide. Some praised Maya as a hero, while others debated whether violence was ever justified. Local news outlets picked up the story, sending reporters to the diner in hopes of interviewing the woman at the center of the frenzy. Maya, however, refused to play along. When a young journalist approached her during her shift the next morning, microphone in hand, she politely declined to comment. "I'm just doing my job," she told him, wiping down a table. "If you're hungry, I can recommend the pancakes. They're pretty good." Her reluctance to engage only added to the intrigue surrounding her. Speculation ran rampant. Was she secretly a martial arts champion? Had she trained with special forces? Or was she simply an ordinary person pushed too far? The mystery fueled even more interest, turning the diner into a temporary hotspot for curious visitors. Among the influx of new faces was a group of teenagers who arrived late one afternoon, whispering excitedly among themselves. They sat at a booth near the counter, stealing glances at Maya whenever they thought she wasn't looking. Eventually, one of them, a shy girl with braces, worked up the courage to approach her. Excuse me?" the girl said hesitantly. When Maya turned to face her, the teenager blushed but pressed on. "I just wanted to say, you're really inspiring. Like what you did. It made me feel like maybe I can stand up for myself too." Maya's heart softened at the sincerity in the girl's voice. She set down the tray she'd been carrying and gave the teen her full attention. "Thank you for saying that," she said kindly. "But remember, standing up for yourself doesn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it's about speaking your truth or walking away from bad situations. Do what feels right for you, okay?" The girl nodded, smiling shyly before hurrying back to her friends. As Maya watched them leave, she realized something important. Her actions had resonated with people in ways she hadn't anticipated. Whether she liked it or not, she'd become a symbol of strength and resilience, not just for herself, but for others who needed a reminder that they weren't powerless. Still, fame wasn't something Maya craved. Offers poured in from talk shows, podcast hosts, and even book publishers eager to capitalize on her story. Yet she turned them all down, preferring to stay grounded in the life she'd built for herself. Instead, she used the platform she'd inadvertently gained to promote causes close to her heart. She started visiting local schools and community centers, teaching self-defense classes to women and girls. Her sessions weren't about aggression. They were about empowerment, confidence, and learning how to protect oneself without resorting to violence. One evening, as Maya locked up the diner after a long day, she reflected on everything that had changed since the fight. Life hadn't gone back to normal, not entirely, but perhaps that wasn't such a bad thing. The experience had forced her out of her comfort zone, pushing her to embrace parts of herself she'd kept hidden for years. More importantly, it had shown her the impact one person could have on the world around them. As she walked to her car, keys jingling in her hand, Maya allowed herself a small smile. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she was ready to face them. After all, she'd already proven, to herself and to everyone else, that true strength comes not from fists, but from the courage to stand up for what's right. By the time a week had passed since the incident, Maya's life had transformed in ways she never imagined. The diner, once a quiet spot where locals came for coffee and pie, had become a bustling hub of activity. Curious visitors from neighboring towns stopped by just to catch a glimpse of the karate waitress, as some newspapers had dubbed her. Strangers asked for selfies, shared stories of their own struggles with bullies, or simply thanked her for inspiring them to stand up for themselves. At first, Maya found it overwhelming. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, and the constant spotlight made her uncomfortable. But over time, she began to see the positive side of it. People needed hope, someone to remind them that they weren't powerless against injustice. If her actions could give even one person the courage to speak up or walk away from a bad situation, then maybe all the chaos was worth it. One afternoon, as Maya cleared tables after the lunch rush, she noticed an older man sitting alone in the corner booth. He'd been coming to the diner regularly since the fight, always ordering the same thing, a black coffee and a slice of cherry pie. Today, however, he lingered longer than usual, staring out the window with a distant look in his eyes. Something about him caught Maya's attention, perhaps the sadness etched into the lines of his face or the way he seemed lost in thought. Curious, Maya approached him with a fresh pot of coffee. "Can I get you a refill?" she asked gently, holding the pot aloft. The man blinked, snapping out of his reverie. "Oh, sure," he said, pushing his cup toward her. As she poured, he hesitated before speaking. "You know, I've been meaning to say something to you." Maya smiled politely. "What's that?" He leaned back in the booth, his voice soft but sincere. "I was here that day. The day you stood up to that biker. I didn't do anything to help, and I've regretted it ever since. Watching you take control like that, well, it made me realize how easy it is to stay silent when we should be stepping in." Maya tilted her head, surprised by his honesty. "It's okay," she said. "Not everyone feels comfortable getting involved in situations like that. What matters is what you do moving forward." The man nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "You're right. Still, I wanted to thank you for reminding me that standing by isn't an option. Sometimes we need reminders like that." His words stayed with Maya long after he left. They echoed the sentiments of others who had approached her over the past week, sharing similar feelings of guilt or admiration. It struck her that her actions hadn't just affected Darren. They'd also sparked conversations among those who witnessed them. People were rethinking their roles in moments of conflict, questioning whether they could have done more, or would do better next time. As word of Maya's story spread beyond the town, invitations began pouring in, from schools, community centers, and local organizations eager to hear her speak. At first, she declined most of them, unsure if she was the right person to lead discussions on topics like self-defense and empowerment. But when a nearby women's shelter reached out, asking her to host a workshop for survivors of domestic violence, she couldn't say no. On a Saturday morning, Maya arrived at the shelter feeling nervous, but determined. A small group of women gathered in the activity room, their expressions wary but curious. Some clutched notebooks, while others sat with arms crossed, clearly hesitant to engage. Maya understood their reluctance. Trust didn't come easily to people who had been hurt. She started by introducing herself, keeping her tone warm and inviting. "Hi everyone, my name's Maya, and I'm not here to teach you how to fight," she said, pausing to let her words sink in. "What I want to share is something bigger than punches or kicks. It's about confidence, awareness, and knowing your worth." For the next hour, Maya led the group through simple exercises designed to build strength, not just physically, but mentally. She taught them basic stances and movements, emphasizing the importance of posture and presence. "Standing tall sends a message," she explained. "Even if you don't say a word, your body language can show others that you won't back down." But the session wasn't just about technique. Maya encouraged the women to talk openly about their fears and frustrations. One participant, a young mother with dark circles under her eyes, admitted she often felt invisible. "No one listens to me," she said quietly. "It's like my voice doesn't matter." Maya knelt beside her, meeting her gaze. "Your voice does matter," she said firmly. "And sometimes standing up for yourself means finding the courage to use it, even if it's scary." By the end of the workshop, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. Women who had entered silently now laughed and chatted, exchanging contact, information, and promising to support each other. As they thanked Maya on their way out, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was why she'd chosen to step into the spotlight, to remind others that they weren't alone. Back at the diner, things continued to evolve. Regular customers greeted Maya warmly, some admitting they'd underestimated her before the fight. "We always knew you were tough, one truck driver joked. But now we know you're unstoppable. Others expressed gratitude for the change her actions had brought to the community. People are talking more openly about racism and bullying, a waitress from another restaurant told her during a supply run. You've inspired folks to call out bad behavior instead of ignoring it. Despite the progress, Maya remained cautious. She knew not everyone supported her. Whispers reached her ears about backlash from certain groups, friends of Darren's gang who resented her for embarrassing him. Late one night, as she closed up the diner, she noticed graffiti scrawled across the back door. "Watch your back." The message sent a chill down her spine, but she refused to let fear dictate her life. Instead, she cleaned it off the next morning and went about her day as usual. Weeks turned into months, and though the initial frenzy died down, Maya's influence endured. Local gyms invited her to teach classes, focusing not only on martial arts but also on mental resilience. Parents enrolled their daughters in her workshops, hoping to instill confidence and discipline early on. Even Mr. Thompson, the diner's owner, softened his stance, allowing her to post flyers for upcoming events on the bulletin board. Through it all, Maya stayed grounded. She still worked long hours serving food, chatting with regulars, and tidying up after closing time. Her newfound fame hadn't changed her core values. It had simply given her a platform to amplify them. Then, one crisp autumn evening, as Maya locked up the diner, she spotted a familiar figure standing near her car. For a moment, panic gripped her chest. Was it one of Darren's friends coming to retaliate? But as the person stepped into the light, she realized it was Darren himself. He looked different, clean-shaven, wearing jeans and a plain jacket instead of leather. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, and his shoulders slumped as if carrying a heavy weight. When he spoke, his voice was low and uncertain. I wanted to apologize," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. "What I did, it was wrong. You showed me that day what real strength looks like. Not violence, but standing up for what's right." Maya studied him carefully, searching for sincerity in his words. Finally, she nodded. "Apology accepted," she said simply. "But remember, actions matter more than words." With that, she climbed into her car and drove home, leaving Darren standing there under the street lamp. Whether he truly meant his apology or was simply trying to save face, she didn't know. And honestly, it didn't matter. What mattered was that she had stood her ground, inspired others, and proven that true power comes from within. As she pulled into her driveway, Maya allowed herself a small smile. Life might never go back to the way it was before the fight, but maybe that was okay. After all, growth rarely happens without challenges. And Maya was ready to keep growing, one step at a time. Months had passed since the incident at the diner, and while life in the small town had mostly returned to its usual rhythm, Maya's world felt forever changed. The fight with Darren wasn't something she thought about every day anymore. It had become a chapter in her story rather than the whole book. Yet its impact lingered, rippling through her life and the lives of those around her in ways both big and small. The apology from Darren, delivered awkwardly under the street lamp that night, stayed with her longer than she expected. She hadn't believed him at first. How could someone like him truly change? But over time, subtle signs began to suggest he might be sincere. For one thing, he stopped coming into the diner altogether. His biker gang no longer loitered outside gas stations or caused trouble at local businesses. Rumors circulated that Darren had left the group entirely, though no one knew for sure where he'd gone or what he was doing now. Then, one chilly winter morning, Maya received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten on plain paper, the handwriting messy but earnest. At first glance, she almost threw it away, thinking it was junk. But something about the envelope made her pause. When she opened it, she found a short note inside. "Dear Maya, I know saying sorry isn't enough after everything I did, but I want you to know I mean it. You showed me that day what real strength looks like. Not just throwing punches, but standing up for yourself without backing down. I'm trying to do better. I've been going to counseling and learning how to handle my anger instead of letting it control me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope someday you'll see I'm not the same person I used to be. Thank you for teaching me a lesson I'll never forget. Maya read the letter twice, her brow furrowed in thought. Part of her wanted to dismiss it as an empty gesture, a way for Darren to ease his guilt without really changing. But another part of her couldn't ignore the vulnerability in his words. He sounded genuine, even if his path forward would likely be long and difficult. Folding the letter carefully, she tucked it into a drawer and decided to let it go, for now. Meanwhile, Maya continued using her platform to make a difference. Her self-defense workshops gained popularity, drawing participants from neighboring towns and cities. Women of all ages came eager to learn not only physical techniques, but also strategies for building confidence and setting boundaries. One participant, a middle-aged woman who worked as a nurse, shared how Maya's class had helped her confront a coworker who consistently belittled her. Another attendee, a college student, credited Maya with giving her the tools to leave an abusive relationship. These stories fueled Maya's determination to keep going. Though she still worked long hours at the diner, she carved out time each week to teach and mentor others. Her grandfather's lessons echoed in her mind. Discipline wasn't just about protecting yourself, it was about empowering others to live fearlessly. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Local news outlets featured her work, highlighting the positive changes she'd sparked in the community. A regional magazine named her one of their everyday heroes, complete with a glossy photo spread. While Maya laughed off the title, "I'm just doing what feels right," she insisted. The recognition brought new opportunities. Schools invited her to speak at assemblies, and nonprofits asked her to collaborate on programs aimed at reducing bullying and promoting equality. But fame wasn't what drove Maya. What kept her motivated was seeing the ripple effect of her actions. Parents told her their kids practiced karate moves at home, giggling as they mimicked her stances. Teenagers confided in her about standing up to bullies at school, inspired by her courage. Even strangers approached her in grocery stores or parks, thanking her for reminding them that they deserved respect. Still, Maya remained humble. She often reminded herself, and anyone who praised her, that she wasn't perfect. "I get scared, too," she admitted during one workshop. "Standing up for yourself doesn't mean you're fearless. It means you act even when you're afraid." As spring arrived, bringing warmer weather and longer days, Maya reflected on how far she'd come. Life hadn't always been easy, especially growing up without her parents and facing prejudice along the way. But those challenges had shaped her into the person she was today, resilient, compassionate, and determined to create a better world, even if it started with small steps. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Maya hosted a special event at the community center, a free self-defense seminar open to everyone. Hundreds of people showed up, filling the gymnasium with energy and excitement. As she stood before the crowd, demonstrating techniques and sharing stories, she noticed familiar faces scattered throughout the audience. There was Mr. Thompson, the diner owner, clapping enthusiastically after each demonstration. The elderly couple who had witnessed the fight sat near the front, nodding approvingly. Even some of the teenagers who once teased her for being too quiet were there, cheering loudly. At the end of the session, Maya took a moment to address the crowd. "When I started teaching these classes, I didn't think anyone would show up," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But here you are. Hundreds of strong, brave individuals ready to support each other. That's what this is all about. Standing together and refusing to let fear or hate win." The applause that followed was thunderous, lasting several minutes. Maya smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. This was what mattered. Not headlines or trophies, but knowing she'd made a difference. Later that evening, as Maya sat on her porch watching the sunset, she felt a deep sense of peace. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, and challenges would undoubtedly arise. But she knew she had the strength to face them, not because of her martial arts skills, but because of the values her grandfather had instilled in her. Kindness, perseverance, and integrity. For the first time in a long while, Maya allowed herself to dream about the future. Maybe someday she'd open her own dojo, combining martial arts training with programs focused on mental health and empowerment. Or perhaps she'd write a book, sharing her journey in hopes of inspiring others. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready as the sky turned shades of orange and pink. Maya leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She thought about Darren, wondering if he'd managed to turn his life around. She hoped so, not for his sake, but for the sake of anyone else he might encounter along the way. Redemption wasn't easy, but it was possible, and sometimes all it took was one moment of clarity to set someone on the right path. Opening her eyes, Maya exhaled slowly, savoring the cool breeze against her skin. Life was unpredictable, full of twists and turns she couldn't control. But one thing was certain. She'd continue fighting, not with fists, but with compassion, courage, and an unshakable belief in the power of standing up for what's right.